Whether you have a mechanical machine or a computerized machine, finding how to set your seam allowance on your machine can be a little bit tricky when you're getting started. So let me switch over to my machine and I'm going to show you exactly how to find your seam allowances, whatever you'd like, on both mechanical and a computerized machine. So let's go over there. First of all then, we need to find out how to change the needle position on our machine. So whether you have a computerized machine or a mechanical machine, you need to understand the little symbol to tell you where the needle is. Sorry, and I know it's very boring just looking at the bed of my machine here. So if you've got a computerized machine, you need to look, this is a little tour of my machine, you need to look at these symbols here. So where you've got all your patterns, and don't worry if you've got a mechanical machine, yours is coming up in just a second. So look at your various patterns on your machine, the stitches that you can do. If you have a look, you can see there's a tiny little oval symbol. Can we see that? I'm going to zoom in just a little bit further. So can you see here, we've got a little oval with the dot on the left. Number 2 is the same. Number 3, we got an oval with the dot in the middle. So that little dot shows you where the needle position is. Okay, hold that thought for a moment. So let me just travel down my machine. I'll show you what this relates to. So if you have a mechanical machine, let me zoom out, you will probably find you've got a dial with various stitches on it, or various symbols. So you'll have a little oval with a dot on the left, another little oval, another little oval. You might have a couple more as well with this dot in various positions. So that is exactly the same thing. It is where the needle is positioned, which is over on the left. And these little dots below it show you your stitch length. So if you've got 3 of these ovals, exactly the same with a dot on the left, this means it's got a very tiny stitch length. This one is a medium stitch length, and this is a long stitch length. And you might have another couple as well. I'll go into stitch lengths in another video. So you need to be able to look to see where your oval is. And if you've got a mechanical machine, you change the dial. This is very high tech, this, isn't it? so we need to look to see if we can get our needle in the central position, which that dot is, or in the far left position. Now, what this relates to, if I put this on the base of my sewing machine, okay, let me zoom in onto my presser foot here. God, isn't that dusty? This is live reporting of my sewing machine that obviously needs a bit of a brush down. So this oval here, the little space in your foot, relates to this oval, the symbols on your machine. Okay, so you can see here this oval relates to that. I've got the dot in the left hand position, and that relates to my needle is in the left hand position here. Okay, so if you're going back to the computerized machine, if I go up to the top here, okay, can you see there I've got my stitch number 1, which I've actually got selected on my machine, which means that stitch number 1 puts my needle over on the left hand position. And just another quick top tip for you, just before we move on, can you see there's a little double bar at the top there? And that's got a little dot right at the top of the stitch line here. That means that if you're lock stitching, it will do a full 3 or 4 stitch lock stitch, and that means it will lock on the spot. Okay, that'll save for another video. All right, so to look at our seam sizes then, and where to find the seam sizes or the seam allowances on our sewing machine, we first of all need to understand where our needle is going to sit. So on computerized machines generally, and on mechanical machines, sorry, on both computerized and mechanical machines, generally when you've got your normal foot on, your universal foot, and the needle is in the left hand position, that means we are nearly good to go for a 5/8 seam allowance. So if I zoom in even further, okay, so look at your base plate. So can you see here, we've got all these markings. If I can get in closer, we've got 5/8 here on my machine. You might have 3/8, you might have 4/8. It really just depends on your machine. So we've got 5/8, I've got an inch, I've got, I can't see that without my glasses. Oh, that just says inches. We've got centimeters here. Okay, so 2, 3, 4 centimeters. We've got these grid lines coming down here, so they correspond to the measurement of. And if I come down just to the front of my base plate, you'll see you've got some corresponding lines here. Okay, so I'm just going to use this bit of paper to show you. So if I wanted to line up, let's just say I wanted an inch, for example, so I would put my fabric, edge of the fabric, against that inch line. And if I come down here, you can see it will match up to this inch line at the bottom. Okay, and when you're running your seam, that's what you'll be concentrating on, is running your fabric from the line down here to the line at the top. But if you concentrate on running your fabric across this, matching up to the edge of this line here, then you'll keep to an inch seam allowance. Okay, and the same thing here. So 5/8 of an inch just there, which is commonly used. It's about a 1.5 centimeters, so commonly used in dressmaking. So we've got 5/8 of an inch there. It's quite difficult to see that line at the top, but if we follow down, it corresponds to this little line down here. So when you are running your fabric through, that's all you need to concentrate on, is running your fabric against that little line there. Now, of course, if you aren't very sure of where your needle is going to sit compared to this, normally the needle position is on the left for these 5/8, these inch lines, centimeters, and so on. But what I say to all my students is, before you do anything, run a test on some scrap fabric first and see where it ends up. So let me put my phone in its holder and let me show you what we're going to do to actual stitching. So I'm going to run a 5/8 of an inch stitch line, or a 1.5 centimeters. And I'm also going to show you where to find your 1/4 inch as well, both for computerized machines and for your mechanical. And if you think you need a 1/4 inch foot, I would think again. So let's just get my phone positioned. Okay, phone positioned, fabric magically appeared. So I've got my needle, I haven't moved that, that's in the left hand position. I'm going to stitch first a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, or 1.5 centimeters. That is pretty much the same thing. So if I line my fabric up to that 5/8 line, you might have 1.5 centimeters marked on your machine. So really get to know these markings on your machine, because it will really help you know your machine and where the measurements on your machine. Okay, but pretty much all machines have these markings, so it's just a case of getting to know yours. Okay, so I'm going to line my fabric up with that 5/8 line here, but just remember I've got this corresponding line down at the bottom of the screen that you can see here. Let's just pull my phone down a little bit, just here. Okay, so there's a corresponding line. So I am going to position my fabric running against that line. I should put my needle down. I always hold my threads, it just stops the little nesting that happens. Okay, and as I'm sewing, I'm concentrating on keeping this fabric. Let me just put that down so you can see better. I'm concentrating on keeping this fabric against this line just here at the bottom. If you haven't got a line here, I'll show you a little handy hack in just a moment, but we're keeping it on that straight and narrow there. Okay, so let's just go up the side of this fabric here, keeping it nice and straight. And cut that. Okay, so that is our first 5/8
an inch seam allowance. And if I've got a little measuring gauge, we can see here that if you haven't seen these before, they're a good little buy for your sewing kit. They're just a little sewing measuring gauge, cheap as chips, and they work by this little slider thing here. The side of it, this flat side, you bring up to the measurement that you want. So can you see I've got it on the 5/8 of an inch here, and that is the end of the 5/8. So if I put the edge of that measuring gauge against my stitch line, and you can see that the seam goes along the line of the red little measuring bit. Okay, so that's that. If you can't see the lines, don't worry, 1/4 inch is coming up. If you can't see the lines, this is what you need: a bit of painter's tape or decorator's tape, just from any hardware store. You don't need to get anything fancy. I'm just see if I can zoom out a little bit. Nothing fancy at all. And if I can find the end, I probably need a whole video tutorial on how to find the end of tape. Do you have this problem as well? Okay, so all I would do is get a bit of tape off, and I would put it down the line that I am trying to run my seam against. Just snip it off at the bottom. Sorry, all I've done is just snipped it off here. Okay, and then when I'm running my seam through, or my fabric through, I would keep the edge of the fabric against the edge of that masking or painter's tape. Okay, so it's a really easy way to find that. So secondly then, your 1/4 inch seam. So again, you're looking at your machine as to where your needle goes. So first things first, if you are on a mechanical machine, you're going to be looking for where you can put your, normally your needle in the central position. But also, and this is why you really need to get to know your machine and run a test on your machine, you may find that you only have this option of the needle in the left-hand position. In which case, you would generally have the needle over here. If you've only got this as your option, have the needle over here and then run your fabric through against the edge of the foot and then measure it. So you would run it there. Okay, so it's against the edge of the foot and measure it, and you'll probably find that's 1/4 inch, but run a little experiment and find. If not, you may need to buy a 1/4 inch foot. That's for a mechanical machine. For a computerized machine, okay, are you ready for this? Because I normally say this hack for all my paying students, so don't tell anybody I am giving you this. So if you have a computerized machine, you have a couple of options. First of all, get to know where you change your stitch width. So I'm going to take my phone out of its little holder again. So I'm back to roving reporter. So over here on my little display, I can change my stitch width. So it's always the zigzag symbol that you have on your machine. So get to know that. With a Janome, you tend to have buttons along the side here, and you select the button. So you'll select the program, you'll select, and that's normally a little hashtag. You'll select the stitch width, which is a zigzag symbol, and you'll select your stitch length, which is a dashed symbol. But in this instance, we want to change the stitch width. So if you're on a Janome, select the buttons till the little light goes, lights up on the stitch width. This is a brother, so I'm looking for this symbol. And down here, you can see I've got the corresponding buttons here, the zigzag stitch, and I'm going to change that to 5.5. Okay, and it doesn't matter whether you're on a Janome or a brother or pretty much any computerized machine, you'll probably find that it is 5.5. The other place you can look, just have a look at the patterns on your machine. So let's just come up here. Okay, so can you see here, I've got a symbol on my machine on all the patterns. There's one here that says, there's a little dotted line. So can you see we've got the dot over the dot over on the right hand side. Okay, so let's move the needle over, and it says P. If you've ever wondered what that is, it means P for patchwork. And if you press it or select that 21, magically it will come up as 5.5 for you. Okay, so either way, if you haven't got that, don't worry, just change your width, stitch width to 5.5. Okay, so let me come down here and show you, because as I have changed that stitch width, can you see the needle has moved over? All right, so let me move it back again. Okay, so, oops, let me just press it. Okay, so that's moved my needle into its normal position. That's where we were just a minute ago, okay, for our 5/8 of a seam. I'm now going to adjust it again to the 5.5, and as I press the buttons, watch the needle. Okay, can you see? So that's 3.5, 4, 4.5, and that's 5.5. So I've moved my needle across to the right. I've still got my universal foot on. I have not got a 1/4 inch foot, but what you'll find is that the distance between where the needle stitches and the edge of the foot is now 1/4 inch. And let me just show you how that works. So I'm just going to put my phone back in the holder again. Right, so you haven't missed much in that intervening millisecond. It's taken me a couple of minutes to get the phone back in the holder, and I've taken off the masking or decorator's tape so you can see a bit easier. So I haven't changed the needle, the foot hasn't changed, this needle is still in this position with your stitch width, or my stitch width, set at 5.5. So what I'm going to do now is get this thread out of the way because it's got a mind of its own, is line my fabric up to the edge of my foot. Let's just bring my phone down slightly so you can see. Okay, so it's on the edge of the foot here, and I'm going to stitch down there, keeping that fabric on the edge of the foot here. Okay, let's just get down to the end. I could turn this into a musical channel now, couldn't I? Maybe not. Stick to stitching, Kim. Thank you. Okay. I don't know why that's got stuck. Do you know, this happens. Sometimes it gets a bit stuck, so you can't see. It's just off the bottom of the screen. The thread got a bit caught up. It happens to all of us. So there's my 1/4 inch seam. So here I've got my little measuring gauge back. I'm taking that little red measuring bit down to the 1/4 inch. And if I put it on that seam, let's get it into camera, you will see there that it's 1/4 inch between the edge of your gauge and that little red bit there. Okay, so that's 1/4 inch seam. As I said, if you've got a mechanical, generally the needle goes into the central position and it's on the edge of the foot. If you haven't got a way to put your needle in the central position, it will stay on the left, but it's on the edge of the foot. So it just depends on the machine that you've got. So have an experiment and see where it ends up. For mechanical machines, you may need to end up buying a 1/4 inch foot, in which case buy the one that is specific to your machine, your brand and make of machine. Don't buy universal 1/4 inch feet. But if you've got a computerised, definitely try that 5.5 out. It hasn't failed me yet. So for any other seam allowances, I've just picked the two common ones. Let me just zoom back out again. For any other seam allowances, it's exactly the same process. You need to be looking at where you want your seam allowance depending on the measurement at the top of the base plate here. Your needle tends to have to be over on the left hand position for these measurements to work. So experiment and see, have your needle over on the left and run some seams down depending on, just choose a line, look at the number above it and run it through, and then test the measurement of it, and you'll find that you can easily find the measurements on your sewing machine.
I do hope that's helped you find a seam allowance, any seam allowance you need on either your computerised or your mechanical machine. For more videos on seams, check out suggested videos just over there.